Hi, everyone. Welcome to our third NAPSO SpudSmart co-sponsored webinar. My name is Dawn Eust, and I'm the editor of SpudSmart magazine. We do have our two experts on standby to talk about what to watch for in your mid-storage health check, and I know they have an abundance of information, so we're going to turn it over quickly. But first, I'm going to turn it over to Addie Waxman to read NAPSO's antitrust statement.
Hello, everybody. I'm Addie Waxman from McCain Foods, and this is the antitrust statement. The antitrust laws apply to individuals just as they apply to any individual group or group of competitors. Competitors may not restrain competition among themselves with reference to the price, quality, or the marketing of their services and goods, and they may not agree or act together to restrict the competitive capabilities or opportunities of other competitors, their suppliers, or their customers. Therefore, it is agreed and understood that there will be no discussion whatsoever at any meetings, whether part of the structured formal meeting sessions or informally at breaks among members or otherwise, involving areas in which any of the parties compete, including pricing, product pricing policies or terms, product marketing strategy, customer territories or locations, or other competitive aspect of a company's operations. Meeting participants have an obligation to terminate any discussion, seek counsel, or if necessary, terminate the meeting if discussions might be construed to raise any antitrust issues. So thank you, and back to you, Dawn.
Thanks, Addie. Okay, so our presenters today, I'll do a bio on each of them, are Dr. Sastry, GNT, and Dr. Amanda Gevins. And so we're going to start with Sastry. So just a quick introduction, if I could speak, that would be great. Dr. Sastry Jayanti is a professor and extension specialist, post-harvest biology, horticulture, and landscape architecture from Colorado State University. His research interests include physiological disorders and nutritional aspects concerning potato. His research employs both molecular and biochemical tools to study the pre- and post-harvest factors affecting the quality of the produce. He recently published articles concerning accumulation of selenium in potatoes, ways to reduce acrylamide formation in fried potato products, and characterization of anti-diabetic compounds such as biguanide related compounds in vegetables. That is a mouthful, Dr. Sastry, and I am very much looking forward to you distilling that down for us. I know you have a lot to get going, so I'll let you start. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Can you hear me now? Okay. So I'll turn off my video so that I can focus there. So thank you. I think for this opportunity, I appreciate NAPSO for providing this platform. And also, I'm happy to present this webinar with Amanda, whom I know from Michigan State University, where I was a postdoctoral researcher. So we had some happy memories from that place. So potatoes remain biologically active after harvest and continue to respire during storage. Through respiration, oxygen is consumed and carbon dioxide, water vapor, and heat are generated. So consequence of this respiration results in CO2 accumulation in the storage, moisture release, and heat from respiration warms the tubers, results in more metabolic activity and further moisture loss. Typically, in a storage, we see CO2 levels between 3,000 to 5,000 ppm. And I have two graphs here. One is respiration at a different physiological stage of tubers. The other one is respiration with different temperatures. So especially when the tubers are harvested, when they are going through the wound healing, the respiration goes up. And also during sprouting, the respiration respiration rate also up compared to the dormancy period where the tubers are at a very low, are at a low respiratory rate. The other thing is at temperature. Temperature is a very important factor. Higher storage temperatures significantly increase respiration, leading to faster CO2 production. And respiratory loss are mainly around low at 45 degrees. But overall, if you see at the losses in a typical storage is between 5 to 8%. Of the total weight loss, the respiration only accounts for 1.5%. The rest is due to the evapotranspiration and the decay in the storage. So higher respiration rates also reduce carbohydrate levels in tubers, potentially altering tuber texture and quality. So why we're talking about higher CO2? What happens if we have high levels of CO2 in the storage? Excess CO2 can lead to fermentative respiration, producing ethanol and off flavors, and may cause internal blackening. And it also causes a reduced fry color quality. So elevated CO2 can disrupt sugar levels, leading to sugar buildup and dark fry color, which is a big issue for processing potatoes. Greater risk of disease development, stress from poor gas exchange weaken tuber defenses, increasing susceptibility to storage pathogens such as a soft rot and fusarium dry rot. And condensation and moisture problems also become an issue in this because high CO2 often correlates with poor ventilation, leading to moisture accumulation and enhancing conditions for decay. Here I am bringing another factor, ethylene levels in storage. So this table illustrates a relationship between CO2 and ethylene levels in a potato storage and then resulting French fry color. This graph shows agricultural fry color. So higher the number, the lighter one, the lighter the French fry color, so which is preferable. Here the single treatments are air, CO2, 0% CO2 and 2% CO2, which are solid lines, where the dotted lines are with the ethylene and ethylene combinations. We can see the higher CO2 levels also doesn't affect much of the fry color, but you see a synergistic interaction between ethylene levels and CO2 levels. Even the low levels of CO2 can cause darkening of the French fries. So this is why managing both gases is critical for maintaining processing quality in a storage. So for optimum quality, storage managers aim to keep both CO2 and ethylene levels low as possible throughout the storage term. So often with a regular ventilation. So the important thing is to consider here is ethylene sources could be from various places, whereas the unburned fuel from gas-driven foggers, contamination from an adjacent store, using ethylene as a sprout inhibitor, or simply exhaust of gas or diesel-powered forklifts being used in that storage. So the next aspect is the fill levels, whether full storage or a half full storage, or storages with a small piles distributed in a big storage. So this slide highlights the key issues we see when potato storages are only half full. While half full storages are common due to market or harvest variability, they behave very differently from fully filled storages. In the half-filled storage, airflow does not move uniformly through the pile. Instead of being forced evenly upward, air tends to short circuit through open spaces. This creates areas with insufficient cooling and others with excessive airflow, causing stress to tubers. And this imbalance causes temperature and humidity issues. Uneven airflow patterns lead directly to temperature stratification and humidity gradients. So warmer air pockets form above or beside the pile, while cooler surfaces promote condensation. This imbalance increases moisture loss in some areas and excess moisture in others. The second aspect is condensation on tubers, walls, and floors, which is a major concern. In a half-filled storage, the condensation risk is higher because warm air interacts more frequently with cold surfaces because there's more surface exposure. The key takeaway is that half-filled storage require more active management, better airflow control. So this is a graph on temperature and CO2 in a half and full storages. The bottom one is temperature. The blue line is full and green line is the half full storage. The baseline CO2 in potato stores is commonly around 3,000, which I told just earlier, is commonly around 3,000 to 5,000. Levels can rise up to 3%. During periods of high crop respiration, right after loading or curing, or any ethylene use in the storage, if that storage is not refreshed daily. Many operators tend to purge threshold around 0.5 to 1. That is the threshold point when they purge if the CO2 accumulates. That's how they build the sensors. Mainly to protect the quality and limit the stress responses of the tubers. During curing and wound healing and first 2 to 4 weeks of storage, the CO2 can significantly build in the full storages, and that time 2 to 4 hours a day of a fan operation with a closed dampers can prevent excessive accumulation in bulk bins. And this is also mainly recommended during the suberization and reconditioning phase. And some of these sprout suppressants like mint oil can also cause elevated CO2 levels in those stores. Partially filled or box stores often have more opportunities to freshen the headspace. So, and maintaining CO2 0.5 to 1% is not a big thing for that. So for them, the main important is the airflow is uniform, and any debris or anything that we brought after harvest should be minimized so that the free airflow is there. Fully filled bulk piles can develop a non-uniform airflow that can lead to CO2 accumulation and go up to 3% if not managed proactively. So this is this shows when a partially full or small, especially seed growers put small different piles to maintain different varieties. This is about that. So in partially filled storage, airflow tends to become uneven. As the airflow's path of least resistance flows over, not to the pile. Dead zones can be formed in those areas, causing heat, CO2, and moisture buildup. This results in condensation, disease, pressure, and rot. So one way to direct the airflow is by using air baffles or curtains to force air through potatoes. So other thing to do is they prevent large gaps between boxes or hopper piles. Gaps allow air bypass, causing uneven cooling. Other thing is they avoid strong airflow on exposed tubers that will dry them, and also moisture loss and shrinkage in those cases. Here, in a fully filled storage, the CO2 accumulation we can observe here, which is the red shaded areas on a pile. If the pile is not even, and if they're having valleys and troughs, the CO2 can accumulate in those corners and then cause issues. So this is mainly because of poor air circulation in those areas can result in that. In the half-filled storage, empty airspace responds rapidly to outside condensations because air warms and cools faster than potato mass. This leads to greater temperature availability in partially filled stores. So avoid rapid temperature changes in the half-filled storages. Large swings can cause condensation risk, and temperature stress results in sprouting and quality loss. So the key takeaway for the half-filled stores are smaller air volume, steady temperature, but to better storage control in those smaller filled storages. Humidity challenges when they're partially filled, so because more air volume, so they can dry up the potato piles. So it's better to cover with some kind of perforated plastic on the piles or on the box tops. So that may reduce. First thing is to avoid the speed, fan speed in those. But this is one way to control and reduce the water loss in those tubers. So this table provides a management of CO2 in full versus partially filled storages. Most of them that we covered just now, but it's in a table form. Reduce or avoid debris coming into storages, both in partially filled or fully filled, because that will reduce the airflow that can cause other issues like CO2 management and other temperature issues and other issues. And partially filled storage, CO2 buildup is not an issue. Avoid over purging the whole room, that can cause temperature loss and all that. Greater chance of CO2 buildup in full storage. Use CO2 thresholds to trigger timed purge cycles. And also avoid long closed periods when they're applying pressure, then a sprout inhibitor or any other treatments. And always air circulation is important. And also sensor locations are also very important. So just mentioned sensors. Sensors, I think the important thing is where we place, how many of them use is a big question. A lot of people ask me on that. So on this slide, we are looking at the key parameters we monitor in a storage, that is CO2, and then ethylene, and then humidity. So CO2 tends to accumulate near the bottom, so low-level measurements are critical to detect buildup early. Similarly, humidity is not uniform. It can vary significantly depending on location, so multiple monitoring points help us to get an accurate picture of the storage environment. Overall, this monitoring allows us to maintain optimal storage conditions and prevent issues like condensation, spoilage, uneven drying of the stored produce. So this is a monitoring schedule for potato storage, unless if they have some issues, known issues in those storages. Temperature, humidity, condensation, we need to see every day. Rot and disease, CO2 levels, and sprouting, we need to check weekly. So the take-home checklist is set CO2 purge strategy by fill level and crop respiration, not just calendar. Drive relative humidity as high as practical without persistent condensation, especially in partially filled rooms. Place sensors on direct air, so you sample and mix where the potatoes are, not just empty space. Don, how I am doing on time-wise, because we're already past 20 minutes. My next phase starting now. Can I finish another 10 minutes?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the next topic, fan management to prevent condensation in a storage. So I listed three main conditions where three main reasons why condensation happens. Warm air touches cold surfaces, humid air cools down, and water vapor turns into liquid. The room isn't ventilated enough to remove the moisture. These are the one. But one other important thing is if there is a leak, and also if there is a damage to the insulation on the storage walls, that also helps in condensation. So why we are talking about condensation? Promotes rot and mold growth. So because of this, we lose marketable and usable potatoes. Weakens potato skin. When tubers alternate between wet and dry, the skin can soften and crack, and then it results in poor quality and shorter storage life. The third aspect is causes floor and structural problems because it can be rotting and other issues and slippery surfaces, and also mold on those wood paneling and all that. Higher maintenance costs, unsafe working conditions that can result in that. So why mechanism behind wet zones? The main thing is fan mismanagement in potato storages. It's a serious issue. So first is the incorrect run times, uneven airflow distribution, direction of fans are poor punch scheduling. So creates these wet zones because how air movement interacts with the pure respiration and moisture dynamics, it all depends on that. So first thing is the localized condensation, poor airflow, create warm moist pockets. Then humid air hits a cooler surface of tubers, condensation occurs, but star spots develops. So the key message in that is maintain uniform air movement to prevent dew point crossing. The second is temperature stratification, fans running too little in a short burst time, that they fail to mix the air properly. So upper layers stay warmer and more humid, lower layers are cooler. The condensation risk at transition zones. So the solution for that is continuous low speed mixing or longer cycles to equalize temperature. So other one is blocked or restricted air paths, uneven fills, debris, or poor ducting can cause dead zones. Inspect airflow paths. The action is inspect airflow paths, clear obstructions, verify CFM per ton delivery. Overventilation during cold weather, excessive fan use when the outside air is cold, that can chill the surface quickly. Humid internal air condenses on cold surfaces, creating wet patches. The best thing is use a stage fans to reduce that. So the main thing is in this is using a hot fan. So noticing where the condensation is happening on the pile, and putting a fan is the best thing. So condensation in potato storage is mainly controlled by managing temperature difference in air movement. That's the main thing. Our goal is to keep the ceiling, wall, and pile temperatures even as possible while maintaining high relative humidity. So what are the strategies for that? One is the recirculation fans under ceiling line, keep air moving, eliminate dead zones. Warm moisture sitting still leads to condensation and wet spots. Run fans long enough to mix temperature layers to avoid stratification, warm air at top, cold air at bottom. Use continuous variable speed fan in some cases to achieve a better mix. And the second strategy list is, as I showed in the picture, as a heater above the pile. Maintain 95% relative humidity, unless if there is a drought, then not 95%. Best long-term solution is improve insulation. That is the first thing to do, so that we can have a better delta T. So the third list of strategies for that is keep fans clear of obstructions, position fans away from end walls, so allow them to have a path, circulate, and combine proper spacing with low speed operation. So spacing of the fans is important, and also low speed operation is also a very good thing to concern. So next thing is what we see out of condensation, what happens in storage. So when condensation happens on sealing or there is a leak, we see these symptoms. The next picture is a sequential development of a hot spot in a bulk pile. Tuber rots turns into a slime. The slime contaminates the surrounding tubers. Anaerobic conditions accelerates decay. Heat from those rods rise up and condense on cooling surfaces, and then nearby tubers also getting affected. So entire thing now collapsed. Then we see on the top of the pile that there is a slump on the top of the pile. So here is a scenario. I think I showed this one, talked about before also, got it from somewhere else. So here is the storage situation. We have 30,000 hundredweight storage, and we have a 1.25 CF from per hundredweight capacity in that storage. Tuber temperature is 45.5 on top and 45 tight, delta T. Cooling potential is 9 hours night. Average during cooling is 41 F, 93 relative humidity. And it's having a 1% rod, that means 720 gallons of water to remove. So the option is not turning the heater, then it will take almost 40 days to remove that water as 18 gallons per day with that existing situation with 30% lower opening. And if we turn the heater on, we can reduce it to 13 days. We can quickly take out that water and convert this one into this situation to minimize the damage. So what are the best practices to avoid wet zones? Balanced fan run time and airflow verification. Check pressure differentials and airflow rates. Avoid short cycling. Run the fan effectively so that it's mixing, it's properly achieving the objective. Monitor relative humidity and CO2 in the storages. And also identify dead zones. Those are the important things to avoid wet zones in a storage. So I would like to thank my funding agencies, CPAC, WCARE, NRCS, NPC, and AFRI, and also acknowledge my people, Dr. Mansoor and Hamasa. She just joined as a grad student, and Dr. Santosh. He joined 2 years back. So that's a good team to work with. So thank you. I appreciate if you have any questions, happy to answer.
Okay, as I forgot to mention it at the top, thank you for your presentations, Dr. Gianti. I forgot to mention that we will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so just put your questions in the chat, and both speakers will stay on after to answer any questions that we have. Also, this is being recorded, and we will be posting it on the NAPSO and the SpudSmart websites. So now it gives me pleasure to introduce Dr. Amanda Gevens, Professor, Extension Specialist, and Associate Chair, University of Wisconsin-Madison. Amanda is a Professor, Associate Department Chair, Extension Pathologist, and Administrative Director of the Wisconsin Seed Potato Certification Program with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Department of Plant Pathology. That is a mouthful. Serving in this role for over 16 years, her expertise in pathogen ecology and integrated disease management management of potatoes and vegetables is internationally recognized, leading to over 100 national and international presentations and over 500 presentations for the Wisconsin industry. She has co-authored over 60 refereed publications, in excess of 90 peer-reviewed technical reports, and more than 60 trade journal articles. She has also contributed to over 2,500 articles in extension conference proceedings and field day reports, hundreds of vegetable production newsletter articles, and has been the coordinating editor of the UW-Madison Division of Extension Vegetable Newsletter for over a decade. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the invitation by the organizers to offer this information to our group. So I'll start off and just take us back to the focus of this session, right? And we were tasked to address mid-storage health checks, right? And in doing this, there's certainly diseases to look for and diagnostic tips that I will offer and provide. But I had to take a step or a few steps back and really introduce this through the lens of best management practices. Because while we can see problems now in mid-storage in real time, in order to address these and to think about what we do in the future to reduce some of these disease risks, we really have to start back in the field, right? So optimal harvest temperatures and soil moisture levels are critical, right? Bringing a healthy a batch of tubers out of the field that are appropriately of appropriate temperature is critical, right? We're trying to manage respiration rates. We're trying to manage any damage that may come of tubers that are too hot, too cold, and resulting, we can see chilling injury that is typically associated with shattering and cracking. Anytime you damage that periderm or that skin, you're laying out the welcome mat for pathogens, right? And so we want to do all we can to protect and preserve the integrity of the periderm of the tuber. And that's really the message through the next 30 minutes that you'll get. With that damaged tissue, we certainly get infection, but we also get desiccation, right? Drying out of the tubers, which can result in shrinkage and value in the yield. So managing bruise from vine kill through harvest is important, and avoid storing tubers that are compromised in some way. If there are frosted tubers, that means there's cellular breakdown. It means there's an Achilles heel for infection, right? And most typically bacterial invasion. And so assessing the status of the tubers at that time is critical, right? And some tubers may not qualify for storage, right? If they're not of a status that's healthy enough to move forward into a longer term storage environment. So that gets us started. I also wanted to talk about pink eye, or what disease or condition formerly known as pink eye, now referred to as periderm disorder syndrome, or PDS. But this is a condition where we sometimes see pink discoloration. Sometimes we don't see it. That it doesn't hit us over the head with that colored symptomology. But what we often see is sort of later stages of this syndrome, where it's a rough surface. It may be referred to as elephant hide, but it looks kind of shaggy, and it tends to be corky in nature. Sometimes looks a little bit like some of the common scab symptoms that we see. But this can be very dependent upon the time in which this condition initiated in the field, when that moisture was high, when the temperatures were high, and what the status of the tuber or the cultivar of those tubers were at that time. So the symptoms can certainly vary. And this syndrome, again, it's compromised, or it's non-performing periderm, right? So we can't expect it to respire as we would want. We can't expect it to serve as an appropriate barrier for secondary infections in the storage. And so the diagnosis is important here. Again, sometimes it's not easy to see. And frankly, as a pathologist that works with our plant disease diagnostic clinic and in my own labs capacities, we have a rough time in confirming diagnoses. There was a black light test that we've used in the past, and we still use, we get some fluorescence with this condition, and so sometimes that's a supporting diagnostic tool. But other times we just see other advancements of the symptomology that we can connect with this condition, this PDS. Right. And so knowledge of the field conditions are important to help us diagnose this as well. Typically, a field may have an area of compaction where moisture is held at a higher level in that tuber profile, and really anywhere in the field where you have poor drainage. Typically, when you have that high level of moisture and that is a condition that's anoxic or low or no oxygen, that is also promotive to other soil-borne pathogens. It's also promotive to diseases like bacterial soft rot, which are favored by low oxygen. So again, sometimes these diseases are noted in test digs or at the time of harvest, and they can also be indicators that some of that visual symptomology on the tuber is probably PDS. Okay, so again, damaged paraderm is going to be more susceptible to infection. And so in this session, I was asked to address bacterial soft rot, pink rot, and fusarium dry rot, and I will do that. But I can't ignore pythium leak, and that's another one that we tend to see with the conditions we've discussed so far. Any kind of damage or crack or the condition of pink eye can also lead to pythium leak, right? When you have damage, that pathogen Pythium ultimum can get in, and it's not an uncommon pathogen in agricultural soils, so it tends to be around. And when you have the right environmental condition and the susceptibility of potato tubers with their damage, it can occur. All right, so here we roll along. I do want to introduce a bit more about the pectolytic bacteria. So in this category, we characterize the diseases that are caused by pectolytic bacteria as either being blackleg, which occurs when you have the pathogen in an association with the seed and it's growing up in the plant within the field. We refer to that and that symptomology that's often dark brown or black and sort of slimy as blackleg. We also have soft rot, which is the tuber effects of these pectolytic bacteria. And that can occur in field. It can also occur post-harvest, where we're talking about it today. But then we also see aerial stem rot. And regionally, this might have a different name. We refer to it as aerial stem rot. Some people call it stem blight. But this is a sort of a foliar phase of pectolytic bacteria active on the plants. And so these resulting diseases can be caused by one or more of pectolytic bacteria. Dickia was more recently introduced into the United States. We've seen far less of that in recent years. In fact, in Wisconsin, we didn't have any diagnosis of Dickia associated with potato symptoms in 2025. And a number of other states here in North America or in the U.S. are seeing that as well. But these pathogens, they can affect many crops, including carrot, broccoli, corn, sunflower, parsnip, but they do not go to legumes and small grains. Right. So again, I'd mentioned this Dickia dianthicola was newly introduced in 2015. And that particular pathogen was spreading in longer distances, most likely in seed, because of the cooler storage temps associated with seed storage and the fact that Dickia wasn't thriving in a cooler storage environment. And so we've seen this over the last decade or so here in the U.S. Europe has seen this for a bit longer. Again, we have good management plans in place for that. But I just wanted to mention that that genus name Dickia, in case you've heard that in association with storage rots or potato, one of the other potato diseases. And so here's just a summary. I thought you will have access to this slide set. So this is a nice way of sort of organizing which of the pectolytic bacteria we tend to see with these symptom types. And this has been dynamic. Over the years, we used to think it was much more straightforward, but these pathogens are certainly not reading the textbooks, right? And so we're seeing them show up in places where they typically, or the the species were not typically associated. So I just provide this for you here. But some of these pathogens that do create blackleg or create the aerial stem rot, some of them can create a tuber rot. So I wanted to at least bring this up here today. So what do we do to manage these pectolytic bacteria in potato systems? Again, well, we're starting back several steps before storage, but starting with the clean source of seed, starting with a clean and sanitized seed storage facility, routinely disinfecting any cutting equipment or handling equipment. While the Dickia species are more recently shown to not spread through cutting, we do know that cutting will spread other pathogens. And so it's good, sound practice to keep that bacteria from moving across lots of seed. Proper wound healing through suberization is an important step here, and warming up with graduation to help promote healing and reduce condensation is another critical step. Storing cooler with moderate relative humidity, so enough to keep the seed in developing the superin layer, but not too moist to push disease. With great ventilation, right? So that oxygenation is critical in keeping pectolytic bacteria at bay. So both of these pathogens can thrive in water and low oxygen environments. They have some differences in their temperature preferences. Okay, so I think we've reviewed this content already. But just to further comment, the excessive irrigation and nitrogen can help push disease of aerial stem rot and these other soft rotting bacterial pathogens. Copper treatments can help limit plant-to-plant spread, but of course are not curative. They're not going to heal the plant of a bacterial infection. Okay, and so just some further details about the in-field potential management strategies, and I'm gonna leave this for further reading, and we'll get to the storage steps here. But I again wanted to provide a bit more comprehensive bit of information for those participating in the webinar here today. So at time of harvest, what has befallen that crop during the production season with respect to pectolytic bacteria, you will have a problem if you had instances of in-field infection of tubers. You certainly have that at the time of harvest, but what you do at that harvest time can help reduce any further infection or prevent infection if to that point you have seen a healthy crop without bacterial infection. So the soft rot pathogens will take advantage of the wounds during harvest and storage, as already mentioned. And so tubers with mature, well-developed periderm are the most resistant. We do know that the Dickia species will grow, but only under warmer storage conditions. So you may not see any development of Dickia species further as you are storing at cooler temps, and those bacteria tend to go dormant. Removing of any symptomatic tubers at the time of harvest and grading can help limit the inoculum that you're putting up in storage. And so if there is any soft rotted tubers at that harvest time or through that movement process, getting that out will, it's simply a numbers game. You're taking inoculum away from that storage location and reducing the likelihood for further infection. Store in well-ventilated storages at cooler temperatures if you know you have a problem with soft rot bacteria, and adjust the temps gradually to avoid the development of condensation. All right, so in summary here, managing that field moisture late in the season is critical, avoiding harvest from infected or wet areas of the field, ensuring good skin set, limiting damage at harvest, warming the tubers under ventilation, gradually cooling down tubers in storage, and then potentially some post-harvest treatments should soft rotted bacteria be identified. And this is where I've just summarized categorically the post-harvest treatments that have reports of reduction of bacterial soft rot. And this is quite a generalization I'm making here. What I've tried to do in each year in developing management recommendations for the growers I serve is to read a lot of reports, right? So not just what I'm doing in Wisconsin, our Storage Research Center, but looking at what's happening around the country and the globe, and providing some guidance there, because we can't model every scenario that you may experience in a large scale storage. And so we know that chlorine dioxide can reduce bacterial soft rot incidence and severity. The delivery is always where we get stuck. We know that chlorine dioxide in and of itself will limit bacterial growth and development, but it's getting a good application to the tubers that need it, and in the nooks and crannies around tubers in the storage, that is the key, right? So getting that application made in the storage is key without excessive moisture introduction. Right, and this tends to work best when there are multiple applications or in some continuous form of treatment for disease control. It's inactivated by soil, and so there's no residual activity of the chlorine dioxide treatment, which is important to note. The next category here are products that contain hydrogen peroxide and peroxyacetic acid, or PAA. These treatments also have reduced bacterial soft rot incidence and severity in trials. We've done some of this work ourselves here in Wisconsin. And again, depending upon the dose and the inoculum level and disease pressure, these particular treatments can play a role in reducing development or advancement of soft rot. And then finally here on this list is ozone. And I know this is one treatment that over my career here, we've seen it sort of ebb and flow in terms of adoption. And it too, again, it depends upon rate and delivery, but can reduce the viability of pathogens on the tuber surfaces, and thereby limiting infection in the storage when applied appropriately. So then what often happens, again, back to our initial slides where we're considering damage and creating entrance of pathogens to tubers, we will address fusarium dry rot, right? And so this is a particular pathogen. It's can be fusarium sammucinum. There are other species that also create dry rot on tubers. But here in Wisconsin, we tend to see sambucinum most commonly, but it needs an entrance. So on its own, fusarium fungal spores in the soil really don't do anything, but they need some welcome mat, right? Some damage. And so what do we see when infection occurs? It tends to be with fusarium dry rot, a very dry, corky, or rust-colored initial infection that is behind often a bruise or an impact fracture or damage, and then it just follows behind in a sort of a dry form and will begin to develop and change. And so the symptoms can vary, but what is uniform is that you'll always find some type of an external entry point for fusarium dry rot to take hold. Okay, so a few other pictures of some more advanced fusarium dry rot in tubers, but this can vary, and sometimes we see other secondary or saprophytic fungi in the storages that give us additional colors. We often see bright yellows. Some of the fusarium species will give us some pinks and purple colors in association with the mycelial sort of network and layers that will grow in and on the tubers. But just a few pictures here of what else you might see in a more advanced stage of fusarium dry rot. And then when we consider treatment here, there is strong evidence as to what treatments might help us control this post-harvest development of fusarium dry rot. And so on this list here, I include stadium. This is a premix of difenoconazole, azoxystrobin, and fludioxonil. This can help reduce fusarium dry rot. The benzimidazoles or Myrtect, in many locations, this is no longer utilized because of resistance built up in time, but this too can help reduce dry rot. Mancozeb is registered just for seed treatments, and it's no longer used on food or feed, but again has a discrete placement. It's not commonly used, but it does have registration, and I thought to mention it here because it can reduce fusarium. The other category I include here are disinfectants. And here you'll see some of those post-harvest treatments previously mentioned for bacterial soft rot control. These are the phos acids, things like phostrol, hydrogen peroxide and peroxyacetic acid, things like sanidate, and then the chlorine dioxide treatments. Again, they can be effective, but they can be inconsistent depending upon time of application, method of application, and the amount of organic matter in and among the pile. Biologicals such as Biosave also have had some demonstrated effects at reducing fusarium in storage. This can provide some suppression when it colonizes the wounds. And then the last disease I'm addressing here is pink rot. Pink rot it's caused by a soil-borne omycete pathogen, or one that is it's actually a cousin to the late blight pathogen. This is Phytophthora erythroseptica primarily, but there are other species like Phytophthora nicotiana that can also cause pink rotting symptoms on tubers. These are soil-borne. They are favored by high moisture in fields, so a lot of the same conditions that will promote pink eye will also promote pink rot. This particular pathogen, erythroseptica, will go to potatoes. It also has a host of tulips, but not a lot of other hosts of erythroseptica. It produces the long-term spore structure without a mating partner. And so oftentimes when you hear late blight being discussed, there's always this risk of an A1 and an A2 mating type coming together, creating a soil-borne risk. But this pink rot pathogen, it doesn't even require that. It will make its own long-term oospores by itself, and we refer to that as homophthalic. But I mention that here because once you have the pink rot pathogen in a field, it will persist there, and that's important to know for longer-term management and rotational strategy building over time. Pink rot likes quite a range of temperatures, so the lowest being 36, the highest being 93. Optimally, it likes 82, so it tends to like a more warmer soil temperature for growth and development, but it can persist in a much broader range of temperatures. And again, it is favored by wet soil. Infection sometimes is apparent at harvest, but sometimes not. You can have latent infection and then not see this occur in tubers until the post-harvest checks. Spread can happen in the post-harvest space, most typically when you have infection develop, and then you have tubers that start to break apart. And as that liquefaction spreads to other tubers, with that you have pathogen, and so that spread can occur through just touching other tubers and receiving that liquid as it moves in the storage. Okay, so symptoms. I've shown the same pink as potato for some time here, but you'll see kind of a soft, watery rot. That's initially, it doesn't have an odor. When you cut the tuber, the pink color doesn't become apparent until about 30 minutes once that cut surface is exposed to the air, and that's the hallmark or the characteristic feature of pink rot. The rot tends to start at the stolon end of the tuber and through eyes and lenticels, wherever there's maybe some wounds on the tuber, and advances there. As this develops, it will turn almost a dark brown to black color, and often you'll see secondary invasion of soft rotting bacteria that can create a more foul odor. Above ground symptoms are often not noted with pink rot, but they can include wilting, subtle wilting of the foliage, or earlier senescence than expected. Okay, and just a reminder to what's happening with the pathogen to create disease. So we get these spores. This particular pathogen has both a long-term persistent soil spore called the oospore. It also has a swimming spore that is formed when you have moisture in the soil. So it's quite adept at getting around the potato system and creating infection. All right, in management, it's about water management, right? Improving soil drainage, avoiding compaction, avoiding over-irrigation, especially later in the season as you get close to harvest time. Cultivars are, we don't know cultivars to be fully resistant, but partial resistance exists, and that can help in limiting that field infection. Rotating with less susceptible varieties where possible is a good method of managing this. And then fungicides are an element of the integrated management plan. These can occur as at plant or in furrow treatments, or at hilling treatments. They can also be applied to the foliage depending on the fungicide for in-season management of pink rot. And then there are some treatments in the post-harvest space, and we'll talk a little bit about these. So this is the menu for fungicides registered for pink rot control in potato. At the top here is mefenoxam and metalaxyl. These are the phenylamides like Ridamil or Metastar. These can be applied in furrow and help earlier on in providing systemic control of pink rot infection in the plant. They certainly give you other control as well of diseases like Nicotiana blight, late blight, Pythium leak. But here we're again focused on pink rot. We also have the concern with mefenoxam and metalaxyl with resistance. So there are populations that have been studied now across the U.S. and globally where we know there is mefenoxam and or metalaxyl resistance in the pink rot pathogen population. And so having an understanding of the status of the population in the fields you're growing is important. And to start to know that, whether you have resistance, it's good to keep track of the effects of this treatment. So if you've used Ridamil Gold or Metastar and it's not working to manage pink rot, it could suggest some resistance, and tests can be run at a number of laboratories to help you identify that resistance in the lab setting. Phos acids can work as foliar treatments when applied over a course of 2 to 4 foliar applications. These typically start at about dime-sized tubers and can help build up resistance within the tubers to pink rot. That is specific to pink rot. We do see that control with these phos acids work here in our state. The post-harvest use of phos acids can also help limit silver scurf as well as pink rot. And so kind of an interesting group of fungicides there that have this unique tuber resistance enhancement activity. Next on the list is thiazolfamid. This is Ranman. When applied in furrow or at hilling or as a side dress can help reduce infection. As you'll see that the timing of these, the goal is to try to get it down to the tubers, right? To get it to the place where that pathogen is active on the tubers. And so for some of these where you don't have downward systemic movement of the fungicide in the plant, you have to do your best at getting it to the appropriate zone because we don't have the piping of the plant to count on to get that fungicide to the tubers. Right. Next on the list is oxathiopyprolin or Arondis. There are a number of premixes now that have Arondis with another fungicide. In one iteration, it comes with Aridamil. In another, it comes with chlorothalonil, and there are a few others now premixes available, and that would be applied in furrow. Then we have mandapropamid on the list, which is Revis, and this would be as a seed treatment to help limit pink rot. And then the last is ethoboxam, and this is a lumen. This is applied as an in-furrow or a side dress to reduce pink rot in the field. All right, so harvest practices to limit pink rot we're calling back to the last series of slides that we've seen. We want to minimize tuber injury and bruising, avoid harvesting from the waterlogged areas, and remove heavily infected tubers from a long storage plan. Once in storage, cool the tubers quickly, maintain proper temps, good airflow and moisture, monitor closely early in the storage. Pink rot often happens pretty soon after harvest, after that big respiration flush. And so it's not one you have to wait for long to reveal itself. And be careful not to mix suspect lots with healthy ones. The post-harvest menu and summary here, what I've done is just gone back through all of the details that I have listed for each individual disease and just put this into a more comprehensive table for your consumption. And I won't read all this to you, but I just wanted to share this with you. It's a way to look at product choices based on what diseases you are targeting. And often when there's a challenge in the storage with disease, it's that you're not targeting just one thing, but one or two things. And so I think these treatments give you a broader spectrum sets of activities for managing disease. And with that, I'll just share with you as well some additional tools that developed through our Wisconsin programs here that are based on weather, based on disease modeling, that can help our potato growers and industry. With that, thank my collaborators here within the university and beyond. And if there is time for questions, I'm glad to take them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We do actually have a number of questions, so I'm going to fire them off to the two of you, and we'll see how it goes. Not all of them are directed at one or the other, so kind of jump in. The first is from Graham Ellis, who says, do we currently have ethylene levels to avoid? Should we refresh bins based on ethylene content? Sastry, I think you're muted.
Okay, thank you. The important thing is the sensitivity of the sensors. So I think I'm answering not only this question, the other questions related to there also. Paul Bithke did a study on how much ethylene we can measure. He measured at ppb levels, parts per billion levels. Even at that level, he could see the increase in respiration. So mainly it comes from the any potato tuber that is having a disease or something. When it is degrading, probably ethylene is coming out from that after infection. So he could see the up to 200. I think if I'm not correct, I can remember that, is 200 parts per billion. He did not see a change. After that, he could see a change, but that caused increase in respiration. So the respiration results in higher CO2. Those things will come into picture. So ethylene levels, if it is, he observed around 20 parts per billion in storage, but at that level, it's not causing much damage. And he did this study on not French fries, chips. He didn't see any difference, but at that stage also, it causing increase in respiration. So I think we need to have proper sensors to detect the levels that is above in around parts per billion level. The important thing is if it combines with CO2, it's having a more synergistic effect. The combination of these two gases can cause darkening of the French fries.
I feel like you probably answered a ton of questions within that question, Sastry. They're coming up, so forgive me if I double tag you there. The next question is, do you manage partially filled storages differently during wound healing compared to full storages? Sastry, oh, okay.
So, sorry, is it for me or? Can you repeat the question, please?
It doesn't say, so I'm whoever feels most comfortable answering that question.
So, okay, do you manage partially filled storages? I think the important thing is don't treat them as a full level storage. You need to have a reduced air volume because it will dry faster because they are just wound healing. They have lots of wounds, so they lose a lot of moisture that can cause issues. So I think the appropriate amount of airflow should be there to get enough right amount of oxygen to inhale it.
Amanda, you mentioned that pink eye has been changed to PDS. Curtis is wondering how come there was a name change?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one of the reasons for it was that I think it became apparent it's not always pink, right? And so it's a bit of a misnomer that we call it that folks would always look for pink eye. And we know, I mean, pink can be created by other things, right? And some cultivars just have pink eyes. So I think that stimulated some of the need to change it, but then also recognizing more those that were studying this disorder just better understood what was creating it, what the outcome was, and so they gave it a name that they felt was more appropriate given the condition. I still refer to it as the disorder formerly known as pink eye myself, but yeah.
It certainly seems easier to say, for sure. Vikram, it's nice to see you on today. Vikram asks, have you come across cases of Clostridium, which is snot-like rot?
Yes, I have not routinely noted Clostridium, and so I'll just mention from diagnostic work that I've done. There are sometimes we'll get samples in, and yeah, I always call it like it looks like a Cadbury egg, right? Where you the outside is firm, it often cracks open, and you get this very very stringy rot, right? And that can be concerning. But I must say I don't see it very often in samples that come to my attention from storages here.
Graham, Sastry, I think this is also for you. Graham asked, what ventilation rate or lower CO2 threshold would you recommend for seed potatoes?
I think I wouldn't necessarily recommend any ventilation rate change for the in terms for the seed. I think the best way to handle it is having a recirculation fans and evenness on the pile so that we don't have a pockets of the CO2 accumulation to handle the reduced amount of CO2 in that. And also there is a more tolerance levels of CO2 in seed.
Thank you. Also for you, Sastry, how low can ethylene concentrations be and still affect potatoes? And does ethylene's lower density influence its accumulation or detection in storage?
Yeah, that's what I told, because the sensors has to be at ppb levels. So that's a kind of a tricky thing. I think around now, for sprout inhibition, they're using from between 2 to 10 ppm levels for sprout inhibition. It should be less than that. I think probably in the one. I'm not very sure because there is no clear research showing that, except Paul Bethke's research on 20 ppb is having at that level not much effect in chip varieties, in chips.
Thank you. I believe this one's for you, Amanda. Thoughts about using ULVs with a sanidate on rot and wet breakdown? Are you gaining at all putting water and chemicals through the ducts?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's not a simple answer to that, right? I think it depends on how much wet rot you have. And if it is localized, right? And so I think if you have a hot spot, there are ways, right? I mean, putting sort of tarping the top of a pile and then directing treatment to a zone like that where you are being a bit more selective in just recognizing where that pile is worst affected to try to isolate the movement of rot. But overall, right, in putting a material through, there's some vapor that you're introducing. And so, depending upon the where you are in time of storage, how long you have left to go, and the severity of the infection that's present and identified, and incidents across or within a pile might change that decision. But yes, there is certainly when you make a treatment, right, you do risk sort of introducing some added moisture, and if you're at a stage where really that just you need to reduce moisture, and that's more important given the circumstances at hand, then it may not be the best decision. But yeah, quite dependent upon the scenario.
Thank you. If CO2 up to 2% does not impact fry color, is it critical to control?
Yes, I think that's a very good question. So the reason is if you have a higher CO2 levels, it's having an effect on respiration, and then it's a cascading effect again that causes stress on the tubers, and then even though it's having a direct effect, but it's causing a stress, and then stress causing to respire more, and then sugar conversions and other issues and disease issues, and even condensation can happen. So that's the reason not to go beyond 2%. Yeah.
AJ also asks, where is the ethylene in stores coming from?
Yeah, ethylene is coming from the tubers that are spoiled, that are having a disease. So mostly the reaction is from that.
Okay. For long-term storages, so 6 to 7 months, when is an ideal time for second jet ag application? Have you heard of monthly jet ag applications?
Yeah, so that the jet ag is typically it is peroxyacetic acid and hydrogen peroxide. I have heard of multiple applications. I think the schemes differ based on I think status of tubers or whoever is involved in the application. Some have a protocol where they they're treating with regularity. Others are just treating if there's some disease noted that needs to be managed. So yeah, I mean, I've heard of repeat applications, but what is that ideal time? I don't have a good answer for that, but I appreciate the question. I think it's just dependent upon what, for those that have adopted a scheme of treatments, 1, 2, 4 applications, if they've had success, they tend to repeat that approach. But I think I would suggest that it's good to see what is the response of the tubers you've treated to that treatment. In consideration. So yeah, it depends on what the targets are in your storage.
Thank you. What is the best method to control condensation on ceilings in large storages, and what's too much on the ceiling?
Yeah, I think we talked quite a bit in this presentation. I think a fan with a heater is the best way to control the condensation on the ceiling.
And should pallet box filled potato storages for fresh and seed be considered partially filled?
So it depends on how you put that box, where you put the box, what is the airflow, how you are where you're putting this box. But always it's better to have a less so that you have a better airflow. If the resistance will increase as you fill the box more. And then I've seen people adopting different methods. They are just putting between those two pipes and just using the other fans to circulate the air in the entire storage. And some are successful in that. It all depends. I think every storage is having a different methods. But as you fill more, you have more air resistance. So you have more issues in that. So, and also if you have too much air exposure to that, it will have a shrinkage in that whatever it is, even a pile or even it's in a box.
Thank you. I believe that wraps up all of our questions. Thank you so much to an engaged audience, and also really fantastic presentations, Amanda and Sastry. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Everyone, thanks for everyone for joining us, and we will have this on the website in the next couple of days. Oh, sorry, one more question. Sneaking in under the wire is Rob with, if a hotspot develops and decay starts to make a sinkhole, can you apply? I think.
Yeah, for what I think you're going to say, Rob. Yeah, I mean, I think specialized treatments like that, where you have a sinkhole developing, yeah, I mean, you can, I think making treatment in that hotspot would be real important, especially if it's happening mid-season and you've got a couple months to go. Yeah, on the top of the pile. Yeah. So yeah, you can also, I mean, I've been involved in these situations too, where it's even making treatment to the top down treatment with the liquid fungicide or sterilant that you're using, but anything just to address that column essentially of infection. Yes, got your comment. Like pour it on the top. Yes, that too can work. It's sort of a quick and dirty method, but it'll help to sort of shut down the activity of and if there's soft rotting bacteria, for example, to kind of keep it within that column. So it can work that way.
Great. Okay, now I'm letting you both go. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great holiday season, and we'll see you in the new year.
Nice to meet you, Brenda. Bye-bye.